We're beautiful, natural looking, easy to apply now.
Our impulses are being redirected.
There is a natural cycle where our solar system encounters a ripple of electromagnetic wave that emanates from the center of the Milky Way galaxy every 12,000 years or so.
State of consciousness that resembles sleep.
And it triggers a massive electromagnetic reversal of our entire system, every planet in the solar system, including the Earth, which can cause massive cataclysms on the planet. I'm not going to go too far into that right now, but according to Edgar Cayce, 12,000 years ago, that was happening. The civilization of Atlantis was a very advanced civilization, much more so than we are today, even. Although their technology developed along different lines than our own. They used things like vibration and sound for healing, for levitation, for restructuring of matter. So very technologically advanced, but more aligned with natural law and spirit as opposed to the way our science has evolved. Edgar Cayce says this advanced civilization known as Atlantis knew this was coming. They were not only extremely advanced in technology, but extremely close to spirit. And so they had extremely developed psychic abilities, very strong intuition, all of these things. They knew these things were coming. They were warned so by the high priest of Atlantis long before it began happening. So Atlantis, the continent, began breaking up as the Earth underwent a series of Earth changes in relation to the cyclical disaster. The oceans rose, massive earthquakes, there was undulations, and certain areas fell and sunk. New land emerged in other areas as the poles began to flip. Edgar Cayce says warnings by the high priest led to massive migrations out of Atlantis. The vast majority of them went to the Americas, according to Edgar Cayce. However, the high priest and his followers, the ones that were closely tied to the high priest, followed him in Egypt, the land of Kemet. At the time, it was largely undeveloped. There were people there. They were of low civilization. They did not have the advanced technologies of the Atlantis continent. The entire Earth was undergoing massive earth changes during this wide-scale cataclysmic event caused by the magnetic pole flip 12,000 years ago. This led to the breaking up and sinking of the entire continent of Atlantis. The high priest and his followers calculated the best location for building the Great Pyramid using a whole slew of different disciplines such as mathematics, numerology, astrology. They ascertained that it was the center of all landmass on Earth, that it had the highest intersection of ley lines, the energy grid of the Earth that intersected at that point, and that it was considered to be relatively safe in future coming cataclysms from the magnetic polar reversals. The primary function of the Great Pyramid was to gather the Earth's energy through the ley lines, through the Earth's grid, to collect it. It was designed architecturally in such a way so that there is natural channels all throughout the structure of the Great Pyramid. There are voids, there are tunnels and openings where this energy gathers and is condensed, much like the way an air compressor works. The energy would be more potent, and then it focuses at a point where that energy can be directed for a certain goal to help now with this generation as we go through the next cyclical disaster, 12,000 years later, the Pyramid of Giza would become activated, and it would harness the Earth's energy, condense it, and raise it in frequency vibration to bolster the consciousness of humanity and expedite our spiritual awakening, so that on the other side of this, we evolve spiritually and energetically, as opposed to reverting to earlier states as had happened in previous cycles. It was not a tomb for a megalomaniac pharaoh. The secondary function of the Great Pyramid, to act as a temple for initiates. Jesus, or Yeshua ben Joseph, and John the Baptist were both initiated in the Temple of Initiation. An initiate, after they had numerous years of dedication and learning and self-mastery, they would be led through a series of passageways and into the king's chamber, where they would put inside a 70-ton granite sarcophagus with a lid slid over it and closed, which means you're not getting out of it. And they would stay in there for 3 days in complete and total darkness, in the direct path of this condensed energy of the earth that is harnessed and collected by the limestone. 2.5 million blocks of limestone with a high content of quartz, setting on the highest point of intersection of ley lines on the planet, all harvesting this energy, condensing it through the architecture of the pyramid and focusing it at a point going right through the sarcophagus in the king's chamber, where an initiate would be sealed in for 3 days. And because of the sensory deprivation that goes along with that, they would experience a type of death. They would cross the veil into the spiritual realms, into the astral, all of the way up into the higher realms, for a period of 3 days, before coming back, being revived, and then were forever changed. Because there's no question about the spiritual nature of the universe whenever you've experienced a bodily death and walked in the spiritual dimensions for 3 days. One thing that is completely different from this cycle and all of the previous other cycles every 12,000 years, according to Dolores Cannon and other sources, including Edgar Cayce, is that this go around, for the first time ever, the entire planet will experience a split energetically, vibrationally, to where the earth will split. The third dimensional earth will continue on its current trajectory and timeline, and a new earth will emerge in the fifth dimension, the new earth. And those that are a vibrational match for that new earth will merge with that timeline and will not go through the timeline of the 3D earth. The Great Pyramid has a hand in that. 2038, the Great Pyramid timeline prophecy. In a couple of the readings, Edgar Cayce mentioned that the architecture of the Great Pyramid, not only was it designed for all of the things I just said, but they structured it in such a way so that as you enter the pyramid and make your way to the king's chamber, each stone lays out a prophecy set in stone, physically, of the Earth's timeline from the time it was built up until 2038. That's when the culmination of all of these things will be complete. Mentioned in that timeline is pretty much every major event that has happened since then, including all of the world wars, the period known as the Dark Ages. It's recorded in stone, mathematically, not with language, but mathematically, with very accurate precision. They did this intentionally to give us a timeline, to warn us again of these things that were going to happen, about coming earth changes, and try to help us through this transition so that we can advance and evolve spiritually, as opposed to reverting back to previous states. Numerous civilizations have risen and fallen in the past. The current narrative by historians, by archaeologists, by just about everybody in the mainstream is that humanity has evolved linearly in a straight line, beginning, millions of years ago. For the longest time, we were, cave dwellers. We carried clubs and we banged rocks together. And then eventually, about 12,000 years ago, we came out of the caves and we learned agriculture. And then we slowly began developing civilization, written language, and we are the pinnacle of civilization today. That's the official narrative. Everywhere I look, I see things that negate that story. There are some of the most advanced civilizations that we've ever uncovered are the oldest ones. Many of the civilizations that we consider to be the oldest in the mainstream, if you look deep enough, you realize that that civilization built on the ruins of a much earlier and much more advanced civilization, such as with the Incas and the Maya. It's not just on the American continents, it's the same thing anywhere that you look. There was previous advanced civilizations that existed well beyond that, much earlier than that. And anytime that information is come across, it's completely dismissed as ridiculous, because if they were to admit the truth of these things, we would have to completely rewrite history, and we would have to explain what happened and why does it seem like every 12,000 years this happens. There's a pretty similar pattern that seems to repeat itself every 12,000 years. They don't want to get into that.
The signal must be shut off at the source.